Margie Reese left the City of Los Angeles Department of Cultural Affairs, I held that symposium, The State of the Arts in South Los Angeles. I try not, not, I'm not trying to keep it being sounding racist, but I'm really focused on the black community. But you know, the state of South Los Angeles, anything south of Wilshire Boulevard,
Right.
there's a concern there of preservation and of resources, of being included in databases that are sending out information for funding and information for facilities, building those communities around the arts, incorporating dance, for instance, in public art projects. That doesn't happen. I mean,
And in this, as you're running that, because that way I can cut out wide segments that can be utilized to show at any time. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for the opportunity to come into your living room or on your computer. You are viewing the Jazz Zone show. My name is Roscoe Lee Owens, and I am your host in the Jazz Zone. And like none other, we're going to be dancing in the zone. And I have the great opportunity to introduce a friend and a colleague and a great man that's doing many, many good things in the city of Los Angeles and in the United States. I'm going to introduce him as this. He is a doctor, but it is my good friend, James Burks. How you doing, sir?
pretty good, Roscoe.
Yes.
How are you doing?
And we were just talking about that in terms of education and doctorate degrees and things like that. But what I really want to go with is a program that you're working on now. I've had the opportunity to work with you at the African Marketplace and see what you've done throughout the city. And I know that you're with the LA, what is it, Cultural Affairs.
Cultural Affairs Department, right?
And Dance South LA Project. Dance South LA Project. When you sent that to me, amazing. And please, let's just start on how that came about, what's going on, and how it impacts our community, our businesses, and especially our culture.
Well, you know, it's not myopic at all. I mean, the idea of Dance South LA is just spins off from some of the things I've done in the past, and my work with even with the Inner City Cultural Center years ago. But
Yes.
I'm principally through the Department of Cultural Affairs, where your concern is how the arts are viewed in our communities, not just how it's viewed, but how it's accepted, either as a frill or art for art's sake. As opposed to looking at the arts in our community as part of the fabric of building positive social welfare in our community. The education, the philanthropic side of it, the physical development of our communities. The African Marketplace was part of that whole process of how do you value what happens in our community? How do you value the arts, and how do you look at the arts in terms of economic development? And the African Marketplace, like most things, is really designed around the whole concept of cultural entrepreneurism, cultural tourism, the idea that the arts are revitalizing communities. When you look at downtown Pasadena, you realize how much the arts are incorporated into it, whether it's historic preservation in terms of the designs of those buildings, or the artists that are used for public art projects. The whole reality behind that is the psychology of what the arts bring to a community. Dance in South LA is a project that I really began to think about in early part of 2006. We were losing the African American general manager of the Department of Cultural Affairs from the city of LA. And I thought I'd take an opportunity to look at the situation in South Los Angeles. That's everything south, I would say, of Wilshire Boulevard. Of course, it takes in a large part of the historic African American community, the Central Avenue corridor, and as it expanded to the west side. And I looked at a report that was done several years ago. While we may not be focused solely on just the African American community, it may sound like it, but there was a report done by the Urban League and several other agencies called The State of Black Los Angeles.
Yes.
If you recall, in that report, there was nothing said about the arts. And those who've been following the arts in our community know after the advent of Proposition 13, most of those classes and workshops and after-school programs and public art projects, language classes, art, music workshops, automobile workshops, and woodwork, it's all taken out of the school system. And coupled with busing, we took a lot of the brightest things out of the classroom. Dance is one of those things that probably suffered as much as literary arts, fine arts, performance arts, music. So I decided I'd do a forum called the State of the Arts in South Los Angeles and invite some of my colleagues and some of the people I respected who represented museums and galleries, who represented the music industry, both the public music industry and the professional music industry, those who represented the literary arts, those who represented festivals and special events, those who represented dance and theater, and those who were involved in education in the arts, and host a forum following Margie's presentation of what she felt the state of the arts in South Los Angeles was, both from the people perspective and from the perspective of the artists, and find out what can we do about creating a venue for dialogue with the Department of Cultural Affairs, where the people themselves actually have a say-so in how they feel the arts could be better supported and utilized in developing South Los Angeles. It's a year and a half I've had this thought in my head. I needed to work with dancers to do it, but I was constantly being running up against a wall because they're an artist. They're about the art. I wanted them to think out of the box. I wanted them to think about the strategic alliances that the dance community needs to develop, the resources that exist and don't exist in the community, the partnerships with theaters and festivals and special events, and the whole idea around public art projects and how can you incorporate, which is a static art, into something that's a movement art. How do you incorporate dance in the public art project, and find ways that we can reinvest in the dance community. Historically, the dance, at one point when I ran the Inner City Cultural Center, dance was really on top. On the other hand, we also had a situation called preservation, and some of the things that happened in Los Angeles just weren't preserved anywhere. I couldn't find the information I wanted on Alvin Ailey, who grew up in Los Angeles and went to Jefferson High School, or the renowned Carmen de Lavilla, who is still widely respected. Her and her husband, Joffrey Holder, very, very nice people, but you can't find any information on them. And George Trishler and Truett and Martina Young and Donnie McHale and Wanda Lewis, all these people taught in South Los Angeles, but there's no history of them. There's no information on them. So what came out of the July 2006 forum was to do a conference and perhaps tie it into a pioneer concert and to bring back some of these people into Los Angeles, and so we can just discuss several things: the economics of dance, developing a dance community, that is collaborative and working together for the same purpose, creating a relationship with the broader Los Angeles dance community that exists in fragments right now, to support those companies that are really flourishing with those who are just languishing, and to look at the idea of audience development. How can we support more audience development by creating strategic partnerships with the theaters in South Los Angeles, or theaters in Los Angeles as a whole, or with festivals like the African Marketplace, where you can look at sustaining your company on an opportunity to work with a festival, or with some of the other projects in LA. Then look at dance itself and break it down in terms of all the elements that make up dance.
Well, when you speak of dance, the image that came into my mind is this dancing, beautiful theater, the Nate Holden Theater. You're talking about the historical, the preservation, the aspect of the community deserves. Let's speak of that, because I know that is going to be the centerpiece where this conference is going to be held.
Yeah, and I'm very proud of that place. I was involved in the design of the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center, or as most people will remember, the site of the old Ebony Showcase Theater.
Yes.
A beautiful theater, probably one of the the best small houses in Los Angeles. Not even probably. I mean, everyone
Yes,
is using that theater. You
is
know,
the best.
yeah, it really is. And we're going to host this there, which makes sense because you know the old Ebony Showcase Theater also had a dance component attached to it as well. On the February 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, we will host 3 days of conferencing. That February 1st, it'll be not only the plenary panel people are invited to, but it'll be a concert that night, and we have invited Carmen de Lavila. Well, in fact, we're bringing Carmen de Lavila back to Los Angeles to talk about the value of historic preservation. Is it still like Sankofa, you know, looking at the past so we can understand what's going on today and look at the future. And then I'm bringing Dr. Halifu Osamari from the San Francisco Bay Area, who I worked with years ago with a project called Black Choreographers Moving Towards the 21st Century. And since we're there, this fits right into that. We also have a good crew of people who are dancers or former dancers who will look at several workshops. One's called Thinking Out of the Box, to try to encourage the dance community to think out of the box, look at another way to sustain and create an economic opportunity for what they're trying to do. And also to look at Hollywood, look at the video industry, look at Las Vegas, look at all these opportunities that dancers have, but generally is waiting for those opportunities to knock on their door. And then there's the whole preservation issue that I talked about. We're fortunate we were able to get Avery Clayton, who's now taking over. You know, if you remember him, Amy Clayton, who's
Yes.
no longer with us. The used to be the Western States Black Research Center, is now the Mamie Clayton Museum and Library. It's going to be housed in Culver City. But speaking with Avery Clayton about this idea the other day, he agreed to take on the role of repository for collectible memorabilia in the dance community. So we've done a lot in a short time. I'm very pleased with the people I'm working with: Yvonne Farrow, uh, Leslie Hardesty, Leah Bayless, Debbie Winters, Joyce Maddox. I know I'm gonna forget someone. But these are dancers and former dancers who've all gravitated and understand what we're doing. Most importantly, we've targeted several young people that we want to push, not the James Burkses, you know, not the others, because the whole idea is still trying to sustain what we leave here, you know. So we've placed a hand on the shoulder of Tamika Washington, the daughter of Lulu Washington, to act as a chair for this, because after this conference is all over, there's still going to have to be the idea: how do we grow and develop from here? Where do we go from here? We have to compile all this information, and we're going to give this information to the Department of Cultural Affairs, who's in the process of developing the new cultural master plan for the city of LA. And since this information is directly from the dance community, they'll be able to incorporate some points of view that they're concerned about in it.
You know, I saw that within this information that you had sent me as it related to that. But I want to touch back because dance, arts, culture, history, and you mentioned it twice, but lightly, and that's the theater, what is it,
Ebony?
no, not the Ebony Showcase, the whole program, cultural arts program that you had many years back.
Oh, Inner City Cultural
Inner
Center.
City Cultural Center.
Yeah.
Intercity Cultural Center. There are so many people that are doing so well because of that. And, you know, going from there to the Nate Holden and and I'm not saying the things that James Burks has done, but I'm saying the things that your mind and participation has been in, which shows a consistency of love and respect for the arts as it relates to how do we amass the business community and the strategic alliances around that.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. I mean, I've been fortunate. I studied something there. I studied engineering and urban planning, you know, so I've been able to incorporate a little of that into it. I also have worked on political staffs, you know, when I worked with the Office of Councilman not Nate Holden, but Councilman Bob Farrell back in the 70s, while I worked with the Inner City Cultural Center. I've also worked at other institutions. And one of the things that you learn is that everyone is entitled to their position in life, and sometimes people get very myopic in that regards. Yeah. So if I'm a politician, I'm going to speak bureaucraties. If I'm working in the business sector, I'm going to speak that kind of economic language. If I'm working in the public art field, I'm going to speak that kind of focus and language. And sometimes we just have to translate it. And as an African American, that becomes very difficult. And the challenge of looking at the bureaucraties of economic development and taking what we do as artists and making sure that's incorporated in there because we understand the role that we play in the economic impact of our city. When I talk about cultural tourism, I'm not talking about just people coming down there and seeing where the Watts riots or this very civil unrest that we've had. I'm talking about coming down and trying to find out where Club Alabama was, and there's a store there, or a restaurant there, or a service station, or a gallery where they bought art, or they patronized someone. I'm talking about coming down and spending time at the Dunbar Hotel where they may spend time in a restaurant or a bar there and providing income for somebody's job, you know. I'm talking about how the arts and cultural tourism impact city policymakers when they determine where the new roads are going to go, when it's going to get slurried, and when a tree is going to go in here, or are there going to be elaborate, ornate signs? I mean, one of the projects I want to work on with a gentleman by the name of Gary Schaffner, he's been talking about this for years, and they're doing something like this in London, is the idea of looking at South LA streets as studio backlots, and really taking Adams Boulevard and turning it into Adams Boulevard 1920s. So it's constantly being used as an art showcase, but you're actually using it for jobs because they're shooting there on a regular basis. They don't have to build it, it's there, you know?
Correct.
Making our city streets fit into the cultural and economic fabric of Los Angeles. But the African American community has to be brought into thinking like that.
Yes.
That's the political side, and that's the people's side. If the politicians know they don't have to just sit in that seat, but think about how can we incorporate the arts in this economic structure, then you will have a much more satisfied community.
As opposed to coming in and understanding that this is happening, this is in terms of urban planning. Now, this is not just happening, this is when you found out about it, but the fact of the matter is we need to have hands-on so we can be a prominent part of the planning.
Absolutely. I mean, it's no secret that, you know, when you do a Pan-African Film Festival or an African Marketplace or a Taste of Soul, that the people who are politically entrenched look at that as a frill. They don't realize how many jobs are created that you put $1 million into an arts festival. And when you calculate the economic impact of the arts, you multiply that between $37.50 and $50 for every dollar that you invest in doing that event. And that's the economic impact that event has had on your city. And it's hard to equate what the social and the media economic impact of that is. We spend a lot of energy trying to change some of the negative media concepts of living in South Los Angeles. You know, to me, personally, South Central LA is a media icon, you know, just copyrighting, trademarking, and selling it.
Yes.
But our political leadership and some of the business leadership need to understand there are real people living in these cities. And events like that, or promoting dance in a way that kids can now get involved in this, that is reincorporated back into our educational systems, which is one of the tasks we're going to use here. We're going to focus on charter schools and look at reincorporating the arts into the charter school system.
Let me ask you a question as well. What I call it is, like, they had the Miracle Mile, but I call it $1 Billion Road, which is the Figueroa corridor that is coming from the billions of dollars they're spending down where the Staples Center is, what they're doing, retrenching and redesigning Los Angeles downtown with, again, utilizing the historic buildings that are also becoming lofts and condominiums, all the way up through right past, I think, an excellent position that you put the African Marketplace in terms of an understanding which was surrounded by the libraries, the information source, right there at the exposition.
Yeah, we tried that. Vision was that the movement for the new, what you call business corridor was right up Figueroa. I mean, Spring Street used to be the business corridor,
yes,
and we wanted to mark the marketplace and position it so that it was there. So when that development happened, that we would be right there because we're a very multicultural event. You know, we focus on the African diaspora, which leaves no one out.
Yes. You know, in my opinion, well-designed, great place, not before its time, but people did not tie into it correctly to make sure that it becomes the destination. You see, when you have the cultural environment that has been created by the African marketplace, centered through institutions of learning, which is the museums, all kinds, which is the natural history, the science museum, the African American museum. It is, and I'm going to talk about the bureaucracy and the understanding for the echelon of funds that are coming in that are funding different major projects. And I'm talking about business, I'm talking about and how do we get that alignment for people to understand that in the forward motion of being centered is correct?
I think the only way that's going to happen, particularly when you deal with the African American community, and I'm going to use the Exhibition Park as a perfect example. We have a major institution there, University of Southern California.
Yes.
You have major stockholders and stakeholders, rather. Stockholder, that's a Freudian slip.
You might be right.
You got major stakeholders in the Exhibition Park property in terms of the Coliseum Commission that operates the sports arena and the Coliseum. You can see the issue going on between the Coliseum and USC now behind that contract. You also have the major player in the Science Museum, the California African American Museum, the Apex Center, and the Museum of Natural History. All of those have a say-so of what goes on at their park, and they're all jockeying for their own position. It's also a very challenging park for anybody to go to because the parking is generally very high, and I don't know if it's really as user-friendly as it possibly can be. And when you bring an institution like the African marketplace, then you run the risk of having to also deal with stereotypes and images. The African American community has had to deal with that for I don't know how many years. When you talk about producing a Afrocentric special event and you label it African. We've managed to do some things over the years to try to change a lot of that, but we still run up against that wall all the time. Even though we felt that we could be a major contributor in terms of our attraction of audience, and we did. The amount of money that they were generating was well over hundreds of thousands of dollars just in parking revenue alone, the marketplace being there. The image of that the marketplace was there that gave to the park, transcend many of the other images that people would see because they came to, but it was a challenge for us. And I say that because politically, we're going to have to find a way to get more arts people on some political staff so they understand that some of us don't come to a political office saying, give me. We come and say, this is what we want to do for you in conjunction with what your vision is for your city or for your district.
In my opinion, they did not see. And these are supposedly visionaries, and I know it's the bureaucracy, the business, the institutions of learning, like you said, USC, but not only USC, it's centered in the heart of Los Angeles, access every which way.
That was our vision. We knew it was accessible. I mean,
yes.
As you look at the Latino community and the African American community,
yes.
Two prominent ethnic groups that play a great role in the African marketplace. I mean, the poster that I have behind me is a Brazilian poster. The one this year is a Cuban poster. In the past, it's been African posters, African American, and Latino posters that represent the African diaspora. It has to be something that people would see in order to accept that this is something that's a universal city walk, but it's not you call that kind of a commercial entity. It's providing jobs, it's providing social welfare, providing a good image for this community. It's been a challenging 23 years.
Yes, and that's the wonderful part of the blessing. No challenge, the creativity comes in because they will see that. Often pioneers, you have to cut the trees. So, and before you know it, there's just a small road before they make anything else happen. I was just on an anniversary down in Palm Springs and picked up this book on the Black Indians and looking at how they set the reservations in spots. And how President Grant said, well, okay, you can have this spot, it's almost like squares, but to keep you away. And then they give you the main road, which was the railway. And when the railroad came, they said, well, okay, 10 miles on each side you can have. So, 10 miles on each side of the major streets anywhere is where the funds are. The aspect that you were speaking of in terms of the history being Spring Street, which was really a first African American major living quarters or neighborhood or development ownership as well. In fact, I was down there at the Stock Exchange, which is on Spring,
Right.
and the back alley is called Harlem. I said, okay, this is real good. I was there visiting another very strong gentleman and a pioneer as well with the 626 Gallery, Charles Bibbs. But I want to stay on dance, and I want to, because our time is moving on, Dance South LA Project. Again, it's a 3-day symposium,
Right.
and it's going to be where and when again?
Well, the dates are February 1st, 2nd, and 3rd.
Yes.
It's going to be at the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center. That's located at 4718 West Washington Boulevard between La Brea and Crenshaw. The hours, the first day is going to be a plenary session. There's reception at 5 o'clock, dance concert at 7 o'clock with Carmen de Lavalla, Donnie McHale receiving special awards, a dance concert by Nigel Yakin, who's coming from Washington, D.C., L. Martina Young, Dr. L. Martina Young now, who formerly danced with the Inner City Repertory Dance Company. He was a professor at the University of Nevada, Reno. There'll also be local companies on that program. And Carmen de Lavalla will be performing herself.
Oh, wow.
And that's for that evening. And then the next day is when the workshop and the conference starts at 8 o'clock that morning. Registration at 9 o'clock. They can call the William Grant Still Arts Center, which is area code 323-734-1164, or the African Marketplace at area code 323-293-1612, or the Nate Holden Performing Arts Center, area code 323-964-9768. And each one of those will be able to give them information. If they can't get that, just call the Department of Cultural Affairs, City of Los Angeles, and they'll give you more information. You must register for the conference. You can do it on site, and for the conference, the concert, because it is limited seating in there. It's about 390 seats. There is no fee for it, but you must RSVP for it. Okay.
Is there online information as well?
Not yet, but I'm going to try to put this up very quickly. Either the African Marketplace site, www.africanmarketplace.org. You can go to the Department of Cultural Affairs website, City of Los Angeles, and you can check it there because the information will be on that website.
Because I'm sure people will be coming from all over the United States and probably different parts of the world to attend.
We hope so. We want everyone to feel open enough to participate in this Dance South LA Symposium. It's not just limited to the African American community, because there are a lot of, there's an old Eastside, Sunside community in that area around Dorsey High School.
Yes.
It's also a huge Latino community, Hispanic, Chicano community in that area, as well as now many more Latin American communities in Belizean, etc. And there's a lot of European companies in that area. So it's really open to everyone. Just because of where I come from, I grew up in South LA. I grew up in Watts and Compton and Inglewood. I'm interested in making sure that there's some restoration to our legacy in that area.
Restoration to our legacy. You know what, James? First of all, I appreciate, and I've had the opportunity to have you on our JazzZone show. Not only that, we'll definitely put some information on our JazzZone website in regards to the dance.